My wife left me for a bad boy because I was too nice. 6 months later, she was homeless while I was living my best life. She packed her bags on a Tuesday morning while I was making her favorite breakfast. Blueberry pancakes with maple syrup from the farmer's market, turkey bacon arranged just the way she liked it, fresh squeezed orange juice because she always said the store-bought kind tasted like chemicals. The kitchen smelled like butter and warmth and all the comfortable routines we'd built together over 8 years of marriage. I was humming something, I don't remember what, and thinking about the weekend trip we'd been planning to Vermont. There was a bed and breakfast she'd bookmarked months ago, one with a fireplace in every room and a view of the mountains. I heard the suitcase wheels rolling across our hardwood floors before I saw her standing in the kitchen doorway with mascara already smudged under her eyes. "Ethan, we need to talk." 4 words. That's all it took to demolish 8 years of marriage and 12 years of knowing each other. My spatula was still in my hand, a half-cooked pancake sizzling behind me, when Miranda delivered the speech she'd clearly been rehearsing. I could tell because her voice had that theatrical quality she got when she practiced something in front of the bathroom mirror. I'd seen her do it before job interviews, mouthing words to her reflection while curling her hair, and the recognition of that familiar habit made everything feel surreal. "I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore." She twisted her wedding ring, the one I'd saved for 14 months to buy, around her finger. The morning light caught the diamond's facets and scattered tiny rainbows across the kitchen cabinets. "You're such a good man, Ethan. That's the problem. You're too good. Too nice. Too predictable. I know exactly what every single day with you will look like, and I need more than this." The pancake burned. I could smell it. My brain registered that fact with strange clarity while the rest of me struggled to process what was happening. Behind me, the batter was charring into something acrid and black, and I thought absurdly that I should turn off the stove, that the smoke detector might go off, that this was a very inconvenient time for a fire hazard. "There's someone else," she continued, and her cheeks flushed with something that looked almost like excitement. A brightness entered her eyes that I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. "His name is Vince. He makes me feel alive, Ethan. He's spontaneous and dangerous and passionate. He doesn't ask permission before he does things. He just does them." I finally turned off the stove. The burned pancake sat in the skillet like an accusation. "How long?" 3 months. 3 months. 90 days of her coming home to our house, sleeping in our bed, eating the dinners I cooked for her, while she was falling for another man. The mathematical part of my brain started calculating all the nights she'd said she was working late, all the weekend errands that seemed to take suspiciously long, all the new lingerie that appeared in her drawer that I'd assumed was meant for me. I thought about the Thursday 3 weeks ago when she'd come home glowing, claiming she'd had a great workout at the gym. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We'd been married for 8 years. Trust was the foundation of everything. "I've already contacted a lawyer," she said, and her efficiency in destroying our life together was almost impressive. She'd always been organized, color-coded calendars, meticulous budgets, birthday gifts purchased weeks in advance. Apparently she applied the same thoroughness to ending our marriage. "The papers will be ready next week. I'm not asking for alimony, I don't want anything from you except my freedom. Vince says we can stay with him until I figure out my next steps." Vince. The name felt like sandpaper in my mouth. "Who is he? Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She sighed, the way she always did when she thought I was being tedious. That sigh had appeared more frequently over the past year, I realized. During conversations about our retirement plans. When I suggested we save the vacation money instead of going to Hawaii. Whenever I asked her to look at the budget spreadsheet I updated every month. "He's a musician. He plays at that bar downtown, the Black Dog? We met when I went to Sarah's birthday party there. You didn't want to come because you had an early meeting the next day." Her tone carried accusation, as if my responsible career choices had driven her into another man's arms. "He was performing that night." Our eyes met across the room, and I just knew. I wanted to laugh. A musician at a dive bar. The cliché was so complete it bordered on parody. How many movies had I seen with this exact premise? The restless wife, the exciting stranger, the boring husband left behind while she chased her passionate dreams. But Miranda's face was deadly serious, radiant with the conviction that she'd found something genuine, something I'd never been capable of providing. "I'm 34 years old," she said softly. "I refuse to spend the rest of my life wondering what I might have missed." She left the ring on the kitchen counter. The diamond caught the light again, throwing those tiny rainbows across surfaces that suddenly felt like they belonged to a different life. The divorce was finalized in 2 months. Miranda wasn't lying about not wanting anything. She signed papers relinquishing her claim to our house, our savings, everything we'd built together. Our attorneys seemed baffled by her generosity. Divorces in our income bracket typically involved months of negotiation, forensic accountants, bitter disputes over assets accumulated during the marriage. Miranda just wanted out. At the time, her attitude confused me. Looking back, I understand that she believed she was trading up. Why fight over the scraps of a boring life when she was embarking on an exciting new adventure? The savings account we'd spent years building? The equity in our modest colonial? The retirement funds I'd been contributing to since my first real job? All of it was pocket change compared to the romantic destiny waiting for her in Vince's arms. My friends rallied around me in the aftermath. Derek, my college roommate, drove 4 hours from Philadelphia to spend a weekend on my couch, forcing me to eat pizza and watch terrible action movies. He didn't ask questions or offer advice. He just sat there, solid and present, making sure I ate something and slept occasionally. My sister Natalie called every night for the first month, even when I had nothing to say and could only manage monosyllabic responses. She'd talk about her kids, her job, the neighborhood drama with her next-door neighbors over enthusiastic Halloween decorations, mundane things that kept the world spinning when mine had stopped. My coworkers at the engineering firm covered for me when I couldn't focus, quietly redistributing my workload without making me feel like a charity case. The thing about being too nice is that apparently it builds the kind of friendships that actually hold up when your life falls apart. For the first few weeks, I went through the motions of existence. I woke up at the same time every morning because my body didn't know how to do anything else. I went to work and stared at blueprints that might as well have been abstract art. I came home to an empty house that still smelled faintly of her perfume, something floral and expensive that I'd bought her for our anniversary. I ate cereal for dinner because cooking for one felt pathetic, and cooking her favorites felt masochistic. The blueberry pancake mix sat in the pantry like a grave marker. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out, but I couldn't look at it either. I didn't cry, I was too numb for tears, but I also didn't sleep more than a few hours at a time. My brain kept replaying moments from our marriage, searching for warning signs I must have missed, cataloging all the ways I'd apparently failed to be exciting enough. The time she'd suggested we take a spontaneous road trip and I'd hesitated because of a work deadline. The anniversary dinner where she'd wanted to try the new fusion place downtown and I'd argued for our usual Italian restaurant. The dozen small moments where I'd chosen caution over adventure, stability over surprise, the comfortable over the unknown. Had I bored her into another man's arms? Was this my fault? The turning point came about 6 weeks after Miranda left. I was sitting in my home office, staring at spreadsheets without seeing them, when I caught my reflection in the darkened window. The man looking back at me was pale, unshaven, with shadows under his eyes and a defeated slump to his shoulders. My clothes hung looser than they should, I'd lost weight without noticing, skipping meals that felt pointless to prepare. I barely recognized myself. I looked like someone waiting to disappear. And suddenly, I was angry. Not the hot, explosive anger that Vince probably expressed by throwing things and causing scenes. My anger was colder, quieter, more deliberate. It coiled in my chest like something patient and steel-spined. Miranda had looked at me and seen someone boring, someone to be discarded when something shinier came along. She'd dismissed 12 years of history because I didn't give her an adrenaline rush. She'd left me for a man who played guitar at a bar and probably thought a retirement account was something old people worried about. Fine. If being too nice wasn't enough, I'd stop making it my priority to prove anything to anyone. But I'd also stop being the doormat who made everyone else's life comfortable at the expense of my own. The spreadsheets on my screen were suddenly very clear. The equations, balanced. The path forward crystallized in my mind with the same precision I brought to engineering problems. I shaved. I ate a real meal, steak and vegetables, properly cooked. I signed up for the gym membership I'd been putting off because Miranda always said we couldn't afford it. And the next morning, I walked into my boss's office and asked about the project lead position that had been open for 3 months, the one I declined twice before because the travel requirements would have meant spending too much time away from home. The Singapore expansion? Patricia raised her eyebrows. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd built our firm's international division from nothing. You turned that down. Twice. I'm not turning it down anymore. She studied me for a long moment, her reading glasses perched on her nose and a pen tapping against her desk. It's a significant commitment. 6 months minimum, possibly extending to a year. The project has complications, regulatory hurdles, local partnership issues, a timeline that makes everyone nervous. Are you sure you're ready for that kind of challenge given everything? Everyone at the office knew about Miranda. Small towns have long memories, and our firm employed half the engineers in the county. The gossip had made its rounds within days of her departure. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Patricia held my gaze for another moment, then nodded slowly. Something shifted in her expression, respect, maybe, or recognition. All right. I'll start the paperwork. You leave in 3 weeks. Singapore changed me in ways I never anticipated. The project itself was challenging, overseeing the construction of a new manufacturing facility while navigating cultural differences, language barriers, and a timeline that seemed impossible when I first reviewed the documentation. The local partners had concerns about American oversight. The regulatory environment was a labyrinth of permits and approvals that seemed designed to test patience. The construction crew spoke 4 different languages, and translating technical specifications became a daily exercise in creative communication. But challenges clarifying. Every problem I solved reminded me that I was capable, competent, and effective. Every late night spent troubleshooting with my team reinforced the truth Miranda had never bothered to see: being nice didn't mean being weak. Being predictable didn't mean being useless. The same qualities that made me boring in her eyes made me exactly the kind of leader this project needed: someone reliable, someone thorough, someone who showed up every day and did the work regardless of how glamorous it felt. I threw myself into the work with an intensity that surprised even me. Within 3 months, we were ahead of schedule. My team respected me because I never asked them to do anything I wouldn't do myself. When the concrete deliveries fell behind, I was there at 5 in the morning to help unload trucks. When the electrical subcontractor made errors, I stayed until midnight reviewing the corrections. I learned enough Mandarin to have basic conversations with our local contractors, stumbling through tones and characters with the help of a patient tutor who met me twice a week at a coffee shop near my apartment. I discovered a talent for negotiation that I'd never had the chance to develop before. The regulatory officials who seemed intimidating on paper turned out to be people with their own pressures and motivations. I learned to listen more than I spoke, to find common ground before pushing for what I needed, to treat every interaction as a relationship rather than a transaction. The same patience that had bored Miranda became my greatest professional asset. And somewhere along the way, I started enjoying my life again. Singapore's food scene became my playground. Every weekend, I explored a different neighborhood, trying dishes I couldn't pronounce and discovering flavors I never knew existed. Hawker centers with their chaotic energy and incredible diversity. Hidden restaurants down narrow alleys where the owner remembered your order after the second visit. Street food that cost $3 and tasted better than anything in the expensive restaurants Miranda and I used to frequent back home. I kept a journal of everywhere I ate, complete with sketches and notes and ratings that became increasingly elaborate as my enthusiasm grew. I took up running along Marina Bay, watching the sunrise paint the skyscrapers gold and pink. The humidity was brutal at first, my lungs ached and my shirts were soaked within minutes, but my body adapted. I ran further each week, exploring neighborhoods that tourists never saw, finding temples and parks and quiet corners of a city that revealed itself gradually to those willing to look. One morning, about 2 months into my stay, I found myself at a small Buddhist temple tucked between apartment buildings in a neighborhood called Toa Payoh. An elderly man was sweeping the courtyard, and he paused when he saw me hovering at the entrance, clearly unsure if I was welcome. He gestured me in with a warm smile and pointed toward a bench in the shade. I sat there for nearly an hour, listening to the sounds of the city filtering through the temple walls, motorbikes and construction equipment and vendors calling out to passers-by, while the smell of incense drifted through the air. The man eventually came to sit beside me, and though we didn't share a language, he seemed to understand something about why I was there. He patted my shoulder twice, nodded as if approving of some decision I hadn't realized I'd made, and went back to his sweeping. I returned to that temple every Sunday morning for the rest of my time in Singapore. Sometimes I sat in silence. Other times I watched ceremonies I didn't understand, moved by the ritual and devotion even without comprehending the meaning. The elderly man, I never learned his name, always acknowledged me with that same warm nod, as if my presence was both expected and welcome. Those Sunday mornings taught me something I hadn't learned from Miranda or from anyone else: the value of stillness. My entire marriage had been built around activity and achievement, checking boxes and meeting expectations. I'd confused motion with meaning, productivity with purpose. But sitting in that temple, watching sunlight shift across ancient stone, I began to understand that some of the most important moments in life happen when you stop doing and simply exist. The physical transformation was noticeable too. The gym membership I'd signed up for in Connecticut became a daily habit in Singapore. I found a 24-hour facility near my apartment and went there most evenings after work, lifting weights and running on treadmills while the city lights glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows. My body changed, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed when I caught my reflection. The defeated slouch was gone. My clothes fit differently. I carried myself with something that felt unfamiliar but welcome, a physical confidence that matched the mental shift happening inside me. I made friends with expats from a dozen countries, each with their own stories of reinvention and starting over. There was Marcus from Germany, a renewable energy consultant whose marriage had ended similarly to mine. Chen Wei from Beijing, a software developer who'd left a comfortable government job to pursue something more meaningful. Sophie from France, a chef building an empire of fusion restaurants across Southeast Asia. We met for dinners and drinks and long conversations about life in places far from home. None of them knew the Ethan who'd been left behind, they only knew the one who'd arrived ready to build something new. I also started seeing May. She was a structural engineer from our Singapore office, brilliant and driven and possessed of a dry wit that caught me completely off guard during our first project meeting. We were reviewing foundation specifications when she made a joke about American over-engineering that had the entire room laughing. Later, over coffee, she apologized for potentially offending me. I told her she was absolutely right and that our buildings back home were probably designed to survive earthquakes, hurricanes, and the apocalypse simultaneously. We began with professional dinners to discuss construction timelines. Those evolved into coffee breaks that stretched longer than they should. Eventually, we stopped pretending we were just colleagues and admitted that something else was developing between us. "You're different from what I expected," she told me one evening, as we watched boats glide across the harbor. The city lights reflected on the water like scattered jewels, and the air was warm and thick with the smell of tropical flowers. When they told me an American engineer was coming to lead the project, I pictured someone arrogant. Someone who would try to impose his way of doing things without understanding ours. I've worked with people like that before. And instead? Instead, you listen. You ask questions. You actually want to learn. She smiled, and there was something in that smile that made my chest tighten in a way it hadn't for months. It's refreshing. Most people in your position would be too proud to admit what they don't know. For the first time since Miranda left, I felt seen. Not as a collection of useful traits, reliable, stable, predictable, but as a person someone genuinely wanted to know. May asked about my childhood, my family, the random interests I'd never bothered to share with Miranda because she always seemed bored by topics that didn't involve her directly. She remembered details from our conversations and brought them up weeks later. She argued with me about engineering principles and then bought me coffee to apologize when she was wrong. I didn't tell May about my divorce for a long time. The story felt too raw, too defining, and I didn't want to be the sad divorced guy seeking validation from a new relationship. When I finally did share the truth, 3 months into whatever we were building, she listened without judgment, asked a few clarifying questions, and then said something that reframed everything. She wanted you to be someone you're not. That's not a reflection of your worth. That's a reflection of her inability to appreciate what she had. Simple. Direct. Exactly right. Update number 1, 3 months later. I've been debating whether to post this update for a while now. The original post got more attention than I expected, and some of you have been asking what happened next. So here goes. The Singapore project wrapped up 2 weeks early, a minor miracle given all the obstacles we'd faced. Our client was thrilled. The regulatory officials who'd been so difficult at the start actually threw us a small celebration at project completion. The facility was on track to open ahead of schedule, which meant the company's expansion plans could accelerate by nearly a full quarter. I was promoted. Regional Director of International Operations, a title that came with a substantial raise, stock options, and the kind of professional recognition I'd spent years quietly working toward without ever expecting to receive. The company flew me back to the States for the announcement, complete with a presentation to the board and a dinner at a restaurant nicer than anywhere Miranda and I had ever eaten. I walked into that conference room feeling like a different person than the one who'd stood in a smoke-filled kitchen watching his wife pack her bags. May and I had decided to try long distance. It wasn't ideal, but she had her career in Singapore and I had mine in Connecticut, and neither of us was ready to upend everything for a relationship that was still relatively new. We video called most nights, working around the 12-hour time difference with a dedication that surprised us both. She'd call during her morning commute, I'd call during my lunch break. We sent each other photos of our meals, competed to find the most interesting thing we'd seen that day, made plans for her to visit during the holidays. It was the first relationship I'd ever been in that felt genuinely equal, two people choosing each other without obligation or convenience playing a role. Here's where things get interesting. About a week after I got back, I stopped at a coffee shop near my office to grab something before a meeting. The place was crowded with the usual morning rush, professionals in suits, college students with laptops, a harried mother wrestling a stroller through the door. I was scrolling through emails on my phone while waiting in line, not really paying attention to my surroundings. My mind was already on the budget projections I needed to review before noon. That's when I heard a familiar voice. Ethan? Miranda was standing 3 feet away from me. She looked different. Thinner than I remembered, but not in a healthy way, more like something had been carved out of her. Her hair was shorter, choppier, with blonde streaks that didn't quite suit her complexion and roots that suggested she hadn't been able to afford maintenance in a while. She was wearing clothes I didn't recognize, a vintage band t-shirt and ripped jeans, the kind of edgy aesthetic she'd never been interested in when we were together. The preppy cardigans and sensible flats had been replaced by something trying too hard to look effortless. But underneath the surface changes, I could see exhaustion. Deep circles under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide. A tension in her shoulders that spoke of chronic stress. Her hands were restless, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, and there was something uncertain in her posture that I'd never seen before. Miranda. I kept my voice neutral. How are you? The question was reflexive, the kind of thing you ask an acquaintance you bump into unexpectedly. But she seized on it like a lifeline. Not great, actually. Things have been complicated. She glanced around the coffee shop as if checking for witnesses, looking for familiar faces who might observe this conversation. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I should have said no. Every bit of self-preservation instinct I developed over the past 6 months screamed at me to make an excuse and walk away. But some combination of curiosity and closure made me nod. We took our coffees to a corner table. Miranda wrapped both hands around her cup like she was cold, even though it was a warm September afternoon. The tremor in her fingers was visible. "Vince and I broke up," she said. I waited for the satisfaction to hit, the vindication of knowing her grand romantic adventure had failed. Instead, I felt almost nothing. Mild curiosity, maybe. A vague sense of inevitability. It was like watching the final scene of a movie I'd already figured out 20 minutes in. "What happened?" "He wasn't who I thought he was," she laughed, but there was no humor in it, just a hollow sound that bounced off the coffee shop's brick walls. Turns out being spontaneous and dangerous isn't actually that charming when you're the one dealing with the consequences. He couldn't hold down a job. Every time he got some gig, he'd blow it by showing up late or getting into fights with the manager. The bar where he was performing fired him a month after I moved in because he punched someone in the audience who heckled him. I sipped my coffee. "Sounds stressful." It was. She leaned forward, and I could see her calculating something behind her eyes, the same look she got when she was about to propose something and wanted to gauge my reaction first. He started borrowing money from me. Just small amounts at first, rent when he was short, groceries, whatever. I thought I was being supportive. A good partner. But then my savings were gone, and he still couldn't pay his half of anything, and when I tried to talk to him about it, he just exploded. Accused me of trying to control him. Said I was just like every other boring person who wanted to put him in a box. The irony was staggering. She'd left me for being predictable, and the unpredictable alternative had turned out to be a financial and emotional black hole. The man who made her feel alive had drained her bank account and called her boring for noticing. "I'm sorry that happened to you," I said, and I meant it. Whatever anger I'd once felt toward Miranda had long since burned itself out. She was just a person who'd made a choice and faced the consequences. There was no satisfaction in watching someone suffer for their mistakes, only a kind of tired recognition that we all pay for our decisions eventually. "The thing is..." She hesitated, wrapping her hands tighter around the coffee cup. "When we broke up, I didn't have anywhere to go. My parents are in Florida, and you know how complicated things are with my mom. Sarah let me crash on her couch for a while, but she's got roommates, and it was awkward. I've been staying at this extended stay motel for the past few weeks, but I can only afford it for another month. Maybe less." Now I understood the real purpose of this coincidental meeting. The coffee shop was 3 blocks from my office, a route she would have known from the years she used to meet me for lunch. This wasn't random. She'd positioned herself here deliberately, waiting for me to appear, working up the courage to have exactly this conversation. "What are you asking me, Miranda?" Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the woman I'd married. Vulnerable. Hopeful. Desperately afraid of admitting how badly she'd miscalculated. "I'm not asking for us to get back together. I know I destroyed that. But maybe you could help me get back on my feet? Just until I figure things out? I still have my nursing license, I just need time to find a position and save up for a deposit on an apartment. A few months. That's all." I set my coffee down. "Let me make sure I understand. You left me for someone else. You told me I was too boring, too nice, too predictable to make you happy. You signed away any claim to our shared assets because you were certain you were trading up. And now that your new life didn't work out, you want me to subsidize your recovery? When you say it like that, it sounds like exactly what it is." I kept my voice calm, almost gentle. "Miranda, I genuinely hope you find your footing. I don't wish you any harm. But I'm not your backup plan. I spent years making your life comfortable, and you decided that wasn't enough. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But she pulled herself together with visible effort, straightening in her chair like she was bracing for impact. "I deserve that, I suppose." "You don't deserve anything from me. That's the point." I stood up. My coffee was getting cold anyway, and I had a meeting to prepare for. "Take care of yourself, Miranda. I hope things work out." I left her sitting there, staring at her coffee, and walked out into the afternoon sunlight. My meeting was in 15 minutes. I had a life to get back to. The encounter with Miranda rattled me more than I expected. Not because I regretted anything I'd said, I meant every word, but because seeing her reminded me how easily I could have become someone who never moved forward. If I'd stayed in that dark house, eating cereal and mourning what I'd lost, I might have been desperate enough to take her back when she came crawling. And then what? A slow, resentful decline into the same patterns that had suffocated both of us? I called May that night, staying on the phone until the sun came up in Singapore. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice crackling slightly over the international connection. "Honestly? Free. I've been carrying around this weight without realizing it, this idea that I needed to prove Miranda wrong by becoming someone different. But today, I realized I don't need to prove anything. She was wrong about me, but that's her problem. Not mine. Good. I could hear her smile through the phone. Because I fell for the real you, not some self-improvement project. We talked for 3 hours that night, about everything and nothing, the way you do when time zones and distance make every conversation feel precious. By the time I hung up, I felt more grounded than I had in months. The following week settled into a comfortable rhythm. My new role kept me busy, conference calls with teams in Tokyo and London, quarterly projections that required actual strategic thinking, mentorship responsibilities I hadn't anticipated but found surprisingly fulfilling. I started volunteering at a local youth STEM program on weekends, teaching middle schoolers the basics of structural engineering with popsicle sticks and rubber bands. Their enthusiasm reminded me why I'd gotten into this field in the first place, not for the money or the stability, but because building things felt meaningful. One Saturday, a 12-year-old girl named Destiny showed me her design for a suspension bridge. It was ambitious and flawed, the load distribution was all wrong, and her cable tension calculations would have resulted in immediate collapse, but the creativity behind it was remarkable. She'd clearly been thinking about the problem from angles I wouldn't have considered at twice her age. I spent 45 minutes with her after the session ended, working through the physics of why her design wouldn't work while helping her figure out how to preserve her original vision. By the time her mother arrived to pick her up, Destiny had a revised blueprint that actually made structural sense and a fierce determination to test it at the next meeting. "Thank you," her mother said as they gathered their things. "She talks about you all week. Says you're the only adult who takes her ideas seriously." The comment hit me harder than expected. For years, I'd defined my worth by what I could provide to Miranda: stability, security, predictability. But watching Destiny's face light up when her bridge design finally clicked, I understood that value isn't always transactional. Sometimes the most important things you give are attention and patience and the willingness to take someone seriously. Derek flew in for Thanksgiving, and we spent the weekend hiking trails I'd never had time to explore when I was married. We talked about his divorce, finalized 2 years before mine, and the ways we'd both changed since college. He'd become a partner at his law firm. I'd become someone who could walk away from a conversation without feeling the need to fix everything. We agreed that our younger selves wouldn't recognize us now, and that this was probably a good thing. My sister Natalie started dating someone she'd met at a conference, and our phone calls shifted from her checking on me to actually trading stories about our lives. She'd always been protective of me, even though she was younger by 3 years. After Miranda left, Natalie had practically moved into my house for the first 2 weeks, cooking meals I couldn't taste and organizing closets I didn't care about, doing anything to keep herself busy while I stared at walls. Now she asked my advice about whether to introduce her kids to this new boyfriend, whether it was too soon, whether she was being foolish for hoping this might be something real. The role reversal felt strange but good. I was finally someone whose opinion mattered for reasons beyond obligation. Slowly, imperceptibly, the house that had felt so empty after Miranda left began to feel like home again. I even redecorated. New furniture, new paint colors, new photographs on the walls. Pictures from Singapore replaced the wedding portraits that had once dominated every surface. The blueberry pancake skillet that I'd been unable to look at for months finally made its way to the donation pile. Progress, I was learning, sometimes meant letting go of things that used to matter. Update number 2, 6 months after the coffee shop encounter. I wasn't planning on writing another update. The story felt complete. Woman leaves man, man rebuilds life, woman faces consequences, man moves on. Neat. Tidy. The kind of narrative arc that makes for satisfying reading. But life rarely stays that simple. 2 weeks ago, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. Normally I let those go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Ethan? It's Sarah. Miranda's friend." Sarah and I had never been particularly close, but she'd always been polite to me during the years of couples dinners and birthday parties. Her voice sounded strained now, urgent in a way that immediately put me on edge. "Sarah. What's going on? Look, I know this is probably none of my business, and you have every right to hang up, but I'm worried about Miranda. She's been living in her car for the past 3 weeks, and I don't know who else to call." Living in her car. The words didn't compute at first. I thought of Miranda, organized, meticulous Miranda who color-coded her closet and kept spreadsheets of her skincare routine, sleeping in a vehicle. It felt impossible. What happened to the extended stay motel? She couldn't afford it anymore. She found a nursing job, but it was part-time, and she was still catching up on credit card debt from when she was with Vince. Apparently he put a lot of expenses on her cards without telling her. Her parents sent some money, but it wasn't enough. Her mom's heart condition has been getting worse, and their medical bills are piling up. I offered to let her stay with me again, but my landlord found out last time and threatened to evict me if I had unauthorized occupants. I sat down heavily on my couch. The living room I'd repainted and refurnished felt suddenly absurd, all this comfort while she was sleeping in a parking lot somewhere. "Why are you calling me?" Because I don't know what else to do. Her mom is sick, some kind of heart condition, so her parents can't really help. Her brother hasn't spoken to her in years, not since that falling out at their grandmother's funeral. She's been applying for full-time positions, but hospitals are slow to hire, and she doesn't have a permanent address to put on applications anymore. It's a whole spiral. Everything just compounds. And you think I should do what, exactly? Sarah was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. Honestly? I don't know. I'm not asking you to rescue her or take her back. I just thought. You were always the kind of person who did the right thing. Even when it was hard. Even when it wasn't fair. Too nice. That's what Miranda had called me. Too predictable. Too good. I'll think about it, I said. But I'm not making any promises. I spent 3 days thinking about it. The easy response was to do nothing. Miranda had made her choices with full knowledge of what she was leaving behind. She'd walked away from our marriage with her eyes wide open, convinced she was destined for something better. Every consequence she was facing now, the poverty, the instability, the loneliness, flowed directly from decisions she'd made with full agency. Why should I insert myself into her mess? She certainly hadn't hesitated to insert herself into my life when it suited her. But the easy response wasn't necessarily the right one. I found myself thinking about my father during those 3 days of deliberation. He'd passed away when I was 23, just before Miranda and I got serious, and I'd always wondered what advice he would have given about her. Dad was the one who'd taught me that character matters more than circumstance, that you reveal who you are through the choices you make when no one's watching, when there's no reward for doing the right thing. He would have hated what Miranda did to me. But he also would have asked what helping her or refusing to help her said about the man I'd become. I thought about the person I wanted to be. Not the person Miranda thought I was, or the person my colleagues assumed I'd become after the promotion, but the actual core of who I'd chosen to build myself into. I'd spent 6 months proving that I could thrive on my own, that I didn't need her validation, that her rejection hadn't destroyed me. But if I'd truly moved past it, what was I afraid of? The answer, when it finally surfaced, surprised me. I was afraid of looking weak. Of having people think I was the kind of man who lets his ex-wife walk all over him. Of confirming Miranda's assessment that I was too nice, too soft, too easily manipulated. My hesitation had nothing to do with her and everything to do with my own ego. And ego, I'd learned, made for a terrible compass. I called May and talked it through with her. She listened carefully, asked questions, didn't try to tell me what to do. What would you regret more? She asked. Helping her and having it go badly, or not helping her and wondering if you could have made a difference? I don't know. Then maybe that's your answer. If you're uncertain, you haven't closed the door yet. On the 4th day, I texted Sarah and asked where Miranda was parking her car at night. Sarah told me a grocery store lot on the outskirts of town, one with lax security that wouldn't tow vehicles left overnight. The same grocery store where Miranda and I used to do our weekly shopping together. I found her there on a Wednesday evening, sitting in the driver's seat with the windows cracked and a thin blanket draped over her shoulders. The car was an old Honda she must have bought after the divorce, a significant downgrade from the SUV we used to share. Fast food wrappers littered the passenger seat. A pillow was wedged against the window. When she saw me approaching, her expression cycled through surprise, shame, and something that looked almost like fear. I knocked on her window. She rolled it down. Before you say anything, I started, I'm not here because I want to get back together. I'm not here because I feel sorry for you, or because I think you deserve to be rescued. I'm here because I have the ability to help, and I've decided that not helping would make me someone I don't want to be. This is about me, not you. She blinked at me, visibly trying to process my words. Okay. I have a rental property. Small house, 2 bedrooms, on the other side of town. The tenants just moved out last month, and I was planning to do some renovations before listing it again. You can stay there, rent-free, for 90 days. That should be enough time to secure full-time employment and save for a deposit somewhere else. After 90 days, you're on your own. No extensions. No negotiations. Ethan, there are conditions. You cover your own utilities. You don't contact me unless it's an emergency. You don't tell anyone that I'm helping you, because frankly, I don't want people thinking I'm a pushover. And when the 90 days are up, we go back to being strangers. Completely. No friendship, no check-ins, no leveraging our shared history for future favors. This is a one-time offer, and if you make me regret it, that's the last time I extend myself for you. She stared at me for a long moment, tears streaming silently down her face. Why would you do this? Because 12 years ago, I fell in love with someone who I genuinely believed was a good person. And despite everything that happened, I don't think I was wrong. I think you got lost somewhere along the way, and you made terrible decisions, and you hurt people who didn't deserve it. But I don't believe you're fundamentally cruel or broken. You're just human. And humans sometimes need help getting back on their feet. I pulled out a key and held it toward her window. The address is 47 Maple Street. The heat works, but the dryer is temperamental. There's a toolkit in the basement closet if you need to fix anything minor. Garbage pickup is Tuesday mornings. She took the key with trembling fingers. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just get your life together and don't make me regret this. I walked back to my car without looking back. Some of you might think I'm an idiot for helping her. Maybe you're right. Miranda hurt me deeply, and by conventional logic, I owed her nothing. Watching her suffer might have been satisfying on some primal level. But I've never been interested in settling scores. Revenge implies that you're still connected to the person who wronged you, still invested in their story, still measuring your success against their failures. I didn't want that. I wanted to be free of Miranda entirely, not bound to her by bitterness any more than I'd been bound to her by love. Helping her was, paradoxically, the most selfish thing I could have done. It released me from the last vestiges of resentment. It proved to myself that her opinion of me had no power over who I chose to be. And it meant that when I closed this chapter of my life, I could do so knowing I'd acted in accordance with my own values, not in reaction to hers. The 90 days passed. Miranda found a full-time position at a hospital 30 miles away, night shifts in the emergency department, exhausting but steady. She texted me once during that period, a simple thank you message that I acknowledged with a thumbs up emoji. No lengthy exchanges. No rekindled friendship. Just a brief acknowledgement and then silence. When the 90 days ended, she moved into an apartment of her own. Sarah updated me a few months later that Miranda was doing okay. Stable. Not thriving, but surviving. Making the slow, unglamorous climb toward rebuilding a life from scratch. I deleted Sarah's number after that conversation. Not out of anger, but because I genuinely didn't need to know anymore. Miranda's story was no longer any of my concern. May visited for 2 weeks over Christmas. We cooked elaborate meals together, exploring recipes from countries neither of us had visited yet. She taught me how to make her grandmother's dumplings, a process that took 6 hours and resulted in a kitchen covered in flour, while I attempted to replicate my mother's pot roast with varying degrees of success. We drank tea at midnight and talked about our childhoods, the fears we'd never admitted to anyone else, the dreams we'd abandoned and the ones we still carried. One evening, we drove to a frozen lake an hour outside the city and walked across the ice under a sky filled with stars. The cold was bitter, stinging our cheeks and making our breath visible in clouds, but neither of us wanted to go back to the car. We stood in the middle of that lake for what felt like hours, surrounded by nothing but white and silence and the vast expanse of winter. I could live here, May said quietly, and there was wonder in her voice. I never thought I'd say that about anywhere cold, but this place feels different from what I expected. Different how? She considered the question. Peaceful. Like the quiet actually means something, instead of just being empty. I understood exactly what she meant. The silence of that frozen lake was nothing like the silence of my house after Miranda left. That silence had been suffocating, the absence of something that should have been there. This silence was generative, the presence of space for something new to grow. We hiked snowy trails, her laughing at my warnings about ice while she bounded ahead in borrowed boots. I introduced her to my sister and my friends, watching her charm Derek with structural engineering jokes and win over Natalie's kids with origami animals she'd learned to fold as a child. When she left, I drove her to the airport and held her at the security checkpoint for longer than was probably appropriate, memorizing the feel of her in my arms, dreading the months before I'd see her again. She fit into my life with an ease that still catches me off guard sometimes. Not because she's trying to be what I need, but because she already is, naturally, without performance or pretense. We argue about politics and design philosophy and whose turn it is to do the dishes. We have separate lives that we choose to share rather than identities that depend on each other. We're discussing the future now. Not in vague, hypothetical terms, but in practical ones. Where we might live, Singapore, Connecticut, somewhere new. What compromises we're each willing to make. How to build something that works for both of us rather than requiring one person to sacrifice everything for the other. The conversations are complicated and sometimes frustrating, but they feel productive in a way that my conversations with Miranda never did. We're building something together rather than negotiating what I could provide. I think about Miranda sometimes, not with longing or regret, but with a kind of detached curiosity. I wonder if she ever thinks about the life she walked away from, the stability she traded for chaos. I wonder if she realizes how close she came to destroying someone who only ever wanted to make her happy. I wonder if she's learned anything, or if she's already rewriting the narrative to cast herself as the victim of circumstances beyond her control. People are remarkably good at that, editing their memories until they become the hero of every story. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. Because I have work that challenges me, friends who value me, a partner who sees me clearly, and a future that belongs entirely to me. The man who stood in that kitchen watching his wife pack her bags feels like a stranger now, someone I used to be, someone who needed to go through that pain to become who I am today. Too nice. Too predictable. Too boring. Miranda was right about one thing: I am predictable. I predictably show up for the people I care about. I predictably work hard and play fair and keep my word. I predictably refuse to become bitter or cruel just because someone treated me badly. If that's boring, then I'm content to be boring. Because on the other side of boring is a life that's actually worth living, stable and peaceful and full of the kind of quiet joy that doesn't make for dramatic stories but makes for genuine happiness. And genuine happiness, I've discovered, is worth more than excitement could ever be. 6 months after Miranda left, she was homeless. 6 months after Miranda left, I was promoted, traveling the world, falling in love with someone who appreciated exactly who I am. Some people might call that justice. I call it the natural outcome of choosing substance over spectacle. Miranda chased a fantasy and found a nightmare. I doubled down on reality and found a life that exceeds any fantasy I could have imagined. The bad boy is still out there somewhere, probably playing guitar at another dive bar, probably making the same promises to the next woman who thinks passion means chaos. He'll keep doing that until he can't anymore, leaving a trail of wreckage behind him. People like Vince don't change, they just find new audiences. And me? I'm still being nice. Still being predictable. Still being everything Miranda said wasn't enough. Turns out, it was always more than enough. She just couldn't see it. Her loss. A final thought: in the end, this story isn't really about revenge. It's about something far more important: the quiet power of knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone make you ashamed of it. When someone tells you that your best qualities are actually flaws, that your kindness is weakness, your reliability is boring, your consistency is suffocating, you have a choice. You can twist yourself into someone unrecognizable, chasing their approval. Or you can trust that the right people will see your value without you having to perform it. The world is full of voices trying to convince you that chaos is more interesting than calm, that drama is more valuable than peace, that passion requires instability. But the most profound love, the kind that actually lasts, is built on exactly the qualities those voices dismiss. Showing up. Keeping promises. Being patient when patience is hard. Choosing someone every single day, not just when it feels exciting. If you're reading this and feeling like who you are isn't enough, please know, you are enough. The people who can't appreciate you aren't your people. The love that makes you feel inadequate isn't really love. Hold on to your goodness. It will carry you further than any wild adventure